fellow bookworms, I'm Katie. Today we're talking about a short story collection. Haven't done that in a while, have we? Tangleweed and Brine by Deirdre Sullivan. This is the book that we are going to talk about today. So this book contains fairy tale retellings, like a retelling of Snow White, a retelling of Rapunzel, a retelling of A Little Mermaid, and so on and so forth. While reading this book, I took notes on the individual stories. So today in this video I'm going to talk about my general thoughts on this story, and then I go into the specifics of two of the stories, one that I really enjoyed and one that I did not enjoy at all. However, if you want to know more about my thoughts on the individual stories, I will write those in my review on Goodreads, and I will link that down below so you can check that out if you want to. Now, I rated every story individually in this book, and then I comprised a general average rating for the entire book, which landed on 2.5 stars, which is not that great. And I think that reflects my thoughts on this book pretty well. Generally, from the writing perspective, there are 8 second-person stories in this book, 3 third-person, 2 first-person stories. The stories that are told in second-person narrative outweigh the other stories by far. Personally, I had a little bit of trouble with these stories because second-person narrative requires strong identification with the main character from the reader. And if you don't identify with the main character, who is the person that is spoken to, these stories can be a little bit alienating to the reader. I felt like the writing had a very clipped and unpolished feeling to it. There were lots of short 1 or 2 word sentences. I don't know how to title them otherwise, because I don't think that if you make a period after every word, the story has more literary merit. I can see it as a, device to emphasize certain words. However, if you overuse it, like every stylistic device, it just doesn't work anymore. However, the rhythm and the structure of most of the sentences are exactly the same throughout every story. There's no variation in style throughout all of the stories. Like, all of the stories are told in the exact same style. And I felt like that got dull very quickly. To give you a better understanding of what this writing style reads like, I will read now an excerpt of the story Sister Fair, which is on page 54 in my copy of the book. So, let's start. You are one of 3. Your name is Fair. Your father is a king. And you are lovely. You have 2 sisters. One is brown. She looks as good as you, about the same. Maybe you're prettier. A touch. The other one's a different story now. Her name is Trembling, and she's a willow to your oak, a kingfisher to your finch, a jewel to your darkly polished stone. You do not mind. They'll keep her in the kitchen till you're married, or they should do, the way of it with girls. Simple counting, ordering, a sequence. Yeah, I thought that was a pretty good example, because that's pretty much the style in which all the stories are told, and imagine reading like 10, 15 of them. I did not get along with the writing, you guys, is what I'm trying to say. The themes that this collection explores are the themes of societal expectations and dealing with them, the alienation of powerful women, not fitting in, femininity and the understanding of it, feeling inferior, wanting to be desired, violence against women, value of women based on her appearance, and ability to bear children. That all sounds good, and I would be so on board with all the exploration of all of these themes. However, I felt like sometimes these stories examine these themes, or some of the themes, but not always. Some stories were there were just nothing in there. They were just empty. Often there would be hints within the story towards the exploration of one of these themes, or some of these themes. It felt like the story was scared to commit to it. And also sometimes there were a lot of themes mixed together, but not really any of them were really examined, not really any of them were, you know, put under the microscope. Most of the stories felt like they did not really have a focus. And some of the retellings did not really, you know, have anything new to add to the stories they were retelling, or they didn't really add anything to it, they didn't really put a different spin on it. And that was just something that left me wondering as to why this story exists and why I read it. Now, a thing that was said about this book was that it was very feminist, and I do not feel like this. There was a lot of violence against women. While I recognize that this is reality for a lot of women and, you know, the world, and we definitely need stories that deal with it, I don't feel like these stories particularly dealt very well with this topic. The women in these stories rarely have any power. They are very incredibly passive characters. They submit to their men, husbands, or brothers. They submit to societal expectations of what women should be. I don't know about you, but that is not my understanding of femininity, or that is not my understanding of feminism. Am I wrong with this? Am I? I don't know. And about the violence, I felt like a lot of it was in these stories just for the shock value. Like, so that the reader could sit there like, what? Again, going back to the writing, I felt like some of the metaphors or allegories were too modern for the setting. Like, the setting in these stories is pretty medievalish, which is emphasized with the illustrations in this book. But then the characters would go on using allegories and talking about, you know, scientific concepts like gravity and such. I felt like it didn't fit into the story just because it didn't fit the setting. The thing that I did not enjoy at all was the recurring theme of a woman's value being her beauty and her ability to bear children. Because I think that's a very backwards view on femininity and on women in general. So, yes, well. Alright, so let's talk about two stories that I want to highlight here a little bit in this video. One of it is a retelling of Rapunzel, which is titled Come Live Here and Be Loved, which I gave 4 stars. Which is the highest rating that I give any of these stories. And this story is told out of the perspective of Rapunzel's mother, or let's say like she is the main protagonist. It's about her. And I especially enjoyed this story despite it being a second person narrative, and I did not enjoy this. I do not enjoy this particularly kind of writing style a lot, as I explained earlier. I like the story because of the exploration of the themes with which I could identify a lot. So this story explores the themes of motherhood and defining femininity over fertility. It talks about looking at a fetus as a monster and as something that drains the mother out of her life. And it talks about pregnancy being a horrifying experience for some women, and also about the rejection that women experience who can't have children. And I think I connected to this story so much because I do not ever want to have children, and being pregnant is probably the worst thing that could happen to me ever. I mean, if that is like something that you do and something that you want, then hey, good on you, more power to you. I hope everything goes perfectly well with your plans and dreams, but it's not for me. I know it's not for me, and I do not want it. And I think that's why the story, you know, why I like the story a lot better. Now let's look at the story that I did not enjoy at all, which is a retelling of A Little Mermaid by Hans Christian Andersen. And it is titled Consume or Be Consumed, and I gave it 1 star. So this is also a second person narrative, and the main character this time is still the Little Mermaid. I think the reason why I did not enjoy the story at all is that it read just like a rehashing of the original. It does take a little bit of a twist in the end, with the Little Mermaid killing the prince and going back to where she came from. However, that was pretty much my main problem with the entire story, is that it takes away the entire point that the original story had. The original story is about, you know, making decisions, following your love, and also dealing with the consequences of your decisions. And in this story, she just goes back to where she came from, and nothing, like, her actions don't really have any consequences. I did not enjoy the story so much because it just doesn't really put a new spin on the story. It doesn't really talk about it out of a new perspective. It took away the integral message that the original story had, and it thus felt very pointless. So generally, would I recommend this book to you? Not really, no. I think there are better and more interesting fairy tale retellings out there if you know, want to scratch that particular itch. Alright, that was it for today. I hope you have a wonderful day. Hope you're reading wonderful, beautiful stories today. And I will see you soon. Bye.